Hello, everyone. My name is Danielle Ruger-Morowski, and I am the Associate Director of Partnerships at Parker Dewey. I'm really glad I get the opportunity to talk to all of you today about our platform and about these short-term paid professional projects. I am going to be keeping an eye on the chat throughout the presentation. So if you have questions along the way or you just want to say hi, please feel free to pop those in there. I'm usually pretty good about addressing those questions as we go, but if I get behind, I will catch up at the end. Now, to get started, I want to first acknowledge some of the challenges that all of you may be facing as you are starting your careers. Before I joined the Parker Dewey team, I used to work in career services and I worked with a lot of students who had challenges very similar to the ones you see on the screen and those that you see in the poll. The good news is, regardless of whether these challenges resonate with you or not, micro-internships are a resource that you can use that are going to help you when it comes to a lot of these challenges. So, for example, I see a lot of you in that poll are saying, I cannot afford an unpaid internship. And honestly, who can these days? Every single Parker Dewey micro-internship is paid, so that makes them really accessible. I also see some of you saying, the opportunities I'm interested in aren't near me, or maybe you have busy schedules, or maybe you're looking for ways to explore that don't involve making a big commitment off the bat. Again, you're not alone. So I want to explain exactly what Parker Dewey micro-internships are, and then I'm going to explain how it helps to address these challenges. Before I get too deep into the definition of a micro-internship, I also want to explain that Parker Dewey is the platform where you will find these experiences. So that's why they're called Parker Dewey Micro-Internships. So what these micro-internships are, again, are short-term paid professional experiences. They're short-term because they're always focused on a specific project or deliverable. So we see these from all different types of industries and departments, all different sizes of companies, but there's something that you're completing and then handing over, typically virtually. Over 90% of these are remote, but you're completing something and handing it over to the company that posted the project. And when you're done with the deliverable, you're done with the micro internship. So examples of deliverables could be maybe you're writing an email marketing campaign. Maybe you're analyzing data and writing up some information about the insights you found. Maybe you're doing something as straightforward as writing a blog post or creating a flyer. But when you're done with the deliverable, you're done with the project, which means these are genuinely very short term, typically somewhere between 10 to 40 hours in total. So for those of you who said, I just don't have a lot of time to commit to my career search, looks like that's maybe a quarter of you. This works even with the busiest of schedules. Every single micro internship is also paid. So again, I see almost half of you are saying, I can't afford an unpaid internship. For every Parker Dewey micro internship you're selected for and complete, you will be paid for your work. And again, we see these from all different types of departments, and they're usually remote. So it looks like just less than half of you are saying, I don't have opportunities near me, or maybe you're struggling with transportation. This is a way that you can get experience from wherever you have a reliable Wi-Fi connection. And the insights from these projects are often used by companies to assess for fit for longer term roles. So the project's rather short, but if you do a great job and it's a good fit, at the other end of it, there could be an internship or a job offer waiting. So for those of you who are saying you're struggling to get the foot in the door, that's most of you. This is a really great way to go about doing that. So hopefully those benefits were clear, but again, accessibility, most are remote. You can do them from anywhere. It's real experience you get to add to your resume or portfolio. When you add it, you will add it as an independent contractor of Parker Dewey, regardless of what company you work with. We are the platform where you'll find the opportunities, and we are also the employer of record. Since they're project-based, you'll have a kickoff call and maybe some check-ins, but most of the time, there's a lot of flexibility as to when you're working on the project, as long as you hit the deadline. A lot like traditional homework. So if you do your best work at 3 a.m., If you get selected for a micro internship, you can work on that project at 3 a.m. Nothing wrong with that. You will still connect with a professional at the company, so you're getting to expand your network so you can ask questions. It's an efficient way for you to explore careers without having to start with a full semester internship. There's that possibility that you could get offered an internship or a job after the experience. And again, every one of them is paid. I see we've got our first question in the chat. Love it. Someone is asking, can I do micro internships multiple times? So if you do one, can you do another? And the answer is yes. You can even do multiple micro internships concurrently if you want to. Now, it is a bit of a numbers game when it comes to applying for micro internships. We tend to see that the more you apply to, the more likely you are to get selected, which is pretty intuitive. It makes sense. But if you apply for multiple and you get selected for one and you're going, okay, that's kind of my bandwidth. I don't think I could handle another project. You can always withdraw your applications from other projects that are still considering you. So that's to say, do not hesitate to apply to any and all projects that interest you. If you have the time, you can take on multiple at once. If you don't have the time for multiple, you can withdraw applications after getting selected for one. I often get questions about who can complete these micro internships. So, like to take a quick moment to talk about eligibility. You do need to be 18 or older. As an independent contractor, we just need that age standard there. But this is open to students or recent graduates of US-based higher education institutions. We also have some partnerships with boot camps that aren't necessarily accredited institutions, but they have a partnership with Parker Dewey, so those students can participate as well. International students can and have done micro internships, but the details for eligibility vary from school to school. So we've had some who have done it through CPT, others through pre-completion or standard OPT, but every school has their own process for credit-bearing internships. They're going to know if you're far enough in your academic program to do pre-completion OPT. So if you are an international student, and I always get questions from international students, so if you are, your first step is going to be to connect with International Student Services at your school. They will be able to tell you if you are eligible or not and what steps you'll need to take if and when you are selected. Because micro interns are independent contractors of Parker Dewey, this is also open to undocumented students as long as you have a valid ITIN number. I see a follow-up question about international students. So that's exactly the kind of question you will want to take to International Student Services because they will be able to guide you on the process as outlined by your institution. Oh, I see another question. What is the typical time frame you see that it takes employers to make a decision? This is a great question. When we pop into the platform, because we are going to be doing a tour today, you'll see that these micro internships move quickly. Most companies are going to make selections within a week of posting the project. I've seen some move as quickly as a couple of hours. So a good rule of thumb and a good tip is to make sure you are logging in regularly. For example, if you only log in once a month, you're only seeing about 25% of the opportunities available to you. So it's important to check the platform on a pretty consistent basis. You'll also see a start date when you look at opportunities. Usually they're going to make a selection by that start date. Sometimes they might still be posted even after that start date. It's still worth your time to apply as long as it's visible. That just means their original timeline didn't work out. So we are now going to hop into the platform, show you what things actually look like. If you do not already have a Parker Dewey account, there is a link in the chat that's going to take you to this page right here. This is a great time to create your account or log in so you can follow along and make some updates to your profile as we talk about best practices. With micro internships and Parker Dewey, money only ever flows one way between students and Parker Dewey, and it is from us to you. Want to make that super clear. There is no cost to create your account, no cost to apply, no cost to do anything. You get paid when you get selected for and complete a micro internship. So create that account. Reminder before we jump in though, Parker Dewey is the platform. We are also the employer of record. We're the folks you reach out to if there are any challenges with your micro internship. If you get into it and things aren't exactly what you expected, or if you're having trouble communicating with your supervisor, we are here to help. So don't hesitate to reach out. So As promised, we are now going to talk about some of the steps involved in setting up your Parker Dewey account in your profile. So how we're going to do this is first I'm going to walk through those pieces that are required, the bare minimum for you to start applying for opportunities. But then we're going to go back and we're going to talk about those pieces that technically aren't required, but are really, really important if you want to increase your likelihood of being selected. So getting started with the required pieces, straightforward, name, email, all that kind of stuff. We ask for your current address and your permanent address. So a couple things about this. We couldn't figure out a better way to word it, but we're not looking for your full address. So please, please, please do not put in a number or a street name. We want you to have some level of security and, anonymity in terms of where you're located. We're just looking for city, state, and zip. Now, you may be wondering, well, if most of these are remote, why do they need to have information about my location? We're looking for where you currently are and where you spend your winter breaks, because even though the projects are remote, companies might be seeking to engage students that could jump into an in-person opportunity, whether it's during their summer break or during the academic year. It's not relevant for every project, but it's relevant for enough that it's helpful for companies to know that information. Now, since these are often being used as auditions for longer term roles, we do have a question here asking if you'd be willing to relocate for a full-time offer. So sometimes you'll see micro internships that are specifically auditions for a full-time role, and you're welcome to apply for that micro internship regardless of where you are, as long as you would be willing to move if you got offered the full-time role. So you'll want to make sure you clarify that there. And then we also encourage you to add some potential zip codes, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Those are some of the good to do things and not required things. Something that is required is your work authorization. Since a lot of these are auditions for full-time roles, and unfortunately, not all companies are always in a position to offer sponsorship, it's helpful for them to know if you would need sponsorship or not. So you'll need to fill out that piece. Also required is the education section. If you have multiple degrees, or if you have a degree already and you're studying in a different institution, you'll want to make sure you add all education experiences. Now, if you took a couple of classes somewhere some summer, but you didn't graduate from that institution, that is not one that you add to this section. This is only for schools where you are currently studying or you have already earned a certificate or degree. That stated, you do want to make sure you add all the ones that do qualify for you or do make sense for you, because when companies are posting, they decide who sees the projects based on school. So sometimes companies will leave projects open to all, but the majority of the time, they're featuring them to specific schools based on a knowledge of their programs or maybe geographic location. And we want you to be able to see every project that is available to you. So that's why that education section is required. The next required section is going to be down in demographics. And when I say required, it's just you're required to answer the questions, but for every one of these options, there's an option to prefer not to disclose. But I want to clarify, the companies do not see this information. This is not something they're privy to or take into consideration when they're making their selections. This is just for us at Parker Dewey to know if we're accomplishing our goal. One of the things we are setting out to do when it comes to micro internships is create a more equitable and accessible path to longer term opportunities. So this just lets us know how well we're doing with that intention. So now we have covered those basics of the things you'll need to do to start looking at opportunities. So we're going to backtrack now and we're going to talk about those things that are not required, but are highly encouraged and can make a big difference in whether or not you get selected. So one of the first encouraged pieces here, make sure you add a profile photo. Doesn't need to be anything fancy, just head and shoulders, make sure the lighting is decent. You should be good to go. Now, you may have gotten advice from your career center saying you never add a photo to a resume. And that's good advice. Listen to your career center folks. They are your friends. But the difference here is you think about this more like a handshake profile or a LinkedIn profile where it's appropriate. That's the difference. The other piece that you'll really want to take advantage of here is a personal statement. Now, this is not an essay. If you are thinking about applying for grad school or some other things, you might hear personal statement and think, oh my gosh, what do I have to write? This is limited to no more than 255 characters, so this is rather short. Do want to share a resource with all of you if you are not sure what to put in this section that can help you figure it out. So that resource is our professional communication tips. So I am going to be putting that resource in the chat. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with that resource as well. So in this resource, if you scroll down to preparing to apply, you're going to see a formula that you can use in that personal statement section. Now, you do not have to use this formula, but we find it can be helpful if you're, trying to figure out and not quite sure how to get started. So the first thing you're going to consider is maybe adding one or two adjectives that are both genuinely true to you and relevant to the types of opportunities that you're interested in applying for. So if you are interested in applying for data analysis projects and you're a very analytical person, then analytical might be an appropriate adjective. If you are interested in social media projects, which typically involve managing a lot of different assets and timelines, there's a lot to keep track of, and you're a genuinely organized person, that might be a good adjective to consider. As many of you have already noticed, I do have a poll. I want you to reflect on which of those options, regardless of what you're interested in, is probably not going to be a good pick, and then we'll come back to that after we've reviewed the rest of the formula. The next thing you might consider is one or two skills or experiences or strengths that are relevant to what you want to do. So if you want to do an SEO project and you've got a certificate in Google Analytics, that's a perfect example. If you are looking to write a blog post or you want to do something with writing as a professional project and you have experience writing blog posts, you could say with experience writing blog posts. So just highlighting some of those things that are really relevant to what you want to be doing. And then the third part, not required, but can be helpful, is what are your goals on Parker Dewey? And these can really vary depending on where you are in your career exploration process or where you are in your academic program. So here we see some examples of a couple personal statements using this formula. This person's adjectives were ambitious and tech savvy. So I'm an ambitious and tech savvy psychology major. They were highlighting their writing skills, and then their goal, they were just trying to start building some real level experience. This person's adjectives were analytical, organized, and proactive. They're telling the reader a lot about themselves with those adjectives. Their skill was highlighting a certificate in data analytics, and their goal was a little bit more unique. They're looking to build awareness of potential career paths, not baths. This last one highlighted that they're hardworking, maybe not the most detailed, but fair. They highlighted their research skills and experience with marketing strategies, and their goal was even more specific. They were interested in applying their skills at a mission-driven organization. So these are just a few examples. When we look at the poll that we had up, most of you had it exactly right. The one that you're not likely to use, regardless of what you're applying for, is going to be nice. It really doesn't tell the employer anything unique about you because most of us are either genuinely nice, as I'm sure is the case for all of you, or we're going to fake it for the sake of professionalism. Even if you're applying for a project where there's some element of communication or it's important to be likable because you're persuading people to do things, that's where adjectives like persuasive or communicative would be more effective than the more generic nice. All right, so now that we have covered that personal statement section, the next thing I want to highlight, I already talked about this, are you willing to relocate? Make sure that you update that. When you're a first-year student, probably not. You want to finish your program, but when it's later on, that is probably going to change. So make sure you're keeping it updated. The next piece here that is encouraged but not required is adding zip codes that reflect areas you'd be interested in moving in. If a company is using a project as an audition for a full-time role, they might be interested in picking folks that are actually interested in their geographic area. It's a better indicator that you're likely to select the full-time job offer. So if you are interested in a particular area, make sure you pop in the zip code of that area. There's also an affiliation section. So if you are part of your school's honors program, if you are a student athlete, or if you are a veteran, make sure you pop that in there. Sometimes there will be projects exclusively available. There are also some affiliations associated with specific nonprofits or other organizations that we have partnerships with. If you qualify for those, you'll find out because the organization you're associated with will have told you. So that's why you just see those three options listed here. Next, in terms of recommended but not required, is this experience section. And I totally get it. You may be thinking, I'm seeing that resume section coming up. Why do I have to add experience? And the reason is because of what companies see when they view their profile. So I just skipped down here to this preview section, which kind of gives you an idea of what companies see when they're looking at your applications. The big difference between this and what they see is they'll also see your question responses for their specific project. But this is the information for the most part they see from your profile. And as you can see here, they see that experience, but they'd have to click into a resume to open it up. So I encourage you to think of this highlighted experience section as kind of a teaser. This is where you want to pick one to typically three, five max, but just a few experiences that most directly speak to the skills that you're hoping to apply to a paid professional project. Now, for a lot of you, a micro internship may be your first real professional experience. You can do these even as a first or second year student. So not having internships or jobs already to add, that is a-okay. But what you should do is consider any class projects or extracurricular or volunteer projects you've done that demonstrate the skills that you want to use for a professional project. After that experience section, we've got the resume section. We have seen a strong preference from employers for candidates that upload a resume, even if there's not a lot on it yet. So career services is going to be your best friend. Get that resume made, get it reviewed, get it added to your Parker Dewey profile. There's also another option for you to clarify availability. Some of you may have a website of sorts that will help, enhance the employer's idea of your skills. So if you're in graphic design, for example, you might have a portfolio site. If you do coding, you might have a GitHub. This is a perfect example of a place you can share those links. There's also an opportunity for you to add a LinkedIn link. I have sat with an employer who was deciding between two candidates. Everything else was basically equal. One had a LinkedIn link and the other didn't. And they said they appreciated that element of professionalism. They selected the candidate with the LinkedIn link. So not only can it help you get selected, but after the project, it can help you keep in touch with your supervisor. It's free to create a LinkedIn account. So if you don't already have one, I highly recommend making one and adding that LinkedIn link to your profile. Now, some of you may be interested in industries or in majors where maybe you don't have a website yet, but you do have some examples of your work, and that's where this document section comes into play. So if you have a writing sample, or maybe you manage social media for your sorority and you want to highlight, the accounts you manage, you can create a PDF, a little description of your sorority, and say, here's our LinkedIn link, here's our TikTok link. Save it as a PDF, upload it here. That's going to allow them to not only read your little description of what you do, but actually see examples of your work to support why you'd be a good fit for these micro internships. In the example of graphic design students, if you don't have a portfolio site yet, which you may not as a first or second year students, you may still have a few examples of your work that would be good to upload here. Now, something important to keep in mind, whatever the file is named, that's what they're going to see from this preview section. So if you're uploading an assignment that demonstrates your skills, don't upload it as final assignment for course code 2346. A company's not going to know what that is. They're not going to click on it. So make sure you rename the file writing sample, press release example, something like that. You could say coding example, so they know what they're clicking on. I see someone who's saying they're having trouble with it accepting documents. We could try to troubleshoot this very quickly, but if it takes a little more time, we might want to schedule a follow-up. Can you put in the chat what type of document you were trying to upload? we'll go ahead and continue talking a PDF. So in that case, it should have done that. If you want to shoot me an email and send me a screenshot of what you're experiencing, we can get that figured out. So just to recap those best practices that we have covered, you'll want to upload a profile photo. You'll want to add a personal statement. You'll want to make sure you clarify if you're willing to relocate, zip codes of interest, add any affiliations that might be relevant. I forgot to highlight this one down here, but if you are an NCAA student athlete, please clarify that as well. So if you're at an institution that, isn't NCAA or you're doing club athletics, that's where the student athlete might fit a little bit more in. This is specifically for NCAA. Make sure you add highlighted experiences, which can be class projects or extracurricular projects. For sure, make sure you upload a resume and any relevant links. You may have specific examples of your work, so you'll add that here. Now, this isn't going to be relevant for every industry of interest, or you might have already covered it in your link. So for example, the graphic design student again, if you've already uploaded a portfolio site link, you may not need to use this section, but it's here for you if you need it. So those are the basics for making sure your profile has max appeal. If anybody has questions about the profile, now is a great time to put them in the chat. But since we've covered the profile, we're now going to take a look at how to look at opportunities and best practices for applying. So to get to those opportunities, you're going to go up here to back to dashboard, and this is where you're going to see the projects that are available to you. Again, companies get to decide when they're posting what schools get to see their projects. So depending on whether companies have been aware of your school is on Parker Dewey, you might see it start with all open micro-internships, or some of you may see it start with featured projects. If you're logged in as a school that sees it start with featured projects, give anything under that section a little bit of extra consideration. If you see it in that section, it means it's available to you, maybe a few other schools, but it's not available to everyone, which means your chances of getting selected are even higher than with other micro-internships. Now, you'll also notice that these projects, there's not a lot on any given day. We're having a little bit of a turnover right now, so there's fewer than there normally are. Usually you're going to see a couple of dozen. So as you're looking at these opportunities, sometimes you'll see them specifically saying they are an audition for a full-time role. Other times they're just the specific project. If something catches your eye, you'll hit the drop down, and this is where you'll be able to read more about the project, as well as the start date, the end date, the estimated number of hours, and it's estimated because micro interns are paid based on completion of the project. Most of these projects are remote, so you will be able to see if it's remote or if there is an element that's on site. Again, the majority of the time it's going to be remote. And right here is what you will earn if you are selected for and complete the micro internship. The company may have also highlighted specific skills that they're looking for, so that's helpful for you as you're deciding whether or not you're a good fit to apply. Once you've read about it, if you decide you're interested, you'll hit that apply. And this first question, why do you think we should select you, is always going to be the same question. So that's a really good one to practice answering. Here in a minute, I'm going to backtrack and we're going to talk about how to answer that question in particular, and really any question effectively. Now, if the project is an audition for a longer term role, there are typically going to be some follow-up questions, making sure that you're available and that you would be able to start in that position. All the additional questions and what they are really up to the employer. So these are going to vary from project to project. We also have some yes or no questions that are not seen by the company who's making the hiring decision. These again are just Parker Dewey questions, so we have some information that we can share about, have students heard about this company before, or is this a good way for them to learn about new ones, those types of things. So as promised, I want to review some of our resources for answering the question, why should we select you? We've covered those tips for success in our profile already, but if you want to review them, we also have a Career Launcher tutorial with some profile tips. This is a lot of those same things that we just covered, but if you prefer to read as opposed to rewatch, that might be helpful for you. We've talked about how to see available micro internships and some of that information on the side. Now we're getting to that resource for helping us answer those questions. So in this resource, we've got a few tips that we think you'll find helpful as you're answering. One of those tips is to look for the question under the question, which I know kind of sounds like a riddle a troll under a bridge might say, but what we mean by that is take into consideration the first question is going to be the same for every single one of these projects. But if you're applying for a social media project versus a data analysis project, your answer should be very different. So the same question doesn't mean it should get the same answer every time. Think about what that company really wants to know. The next tip, use the description to your advantage. You're going to get this resource in the follow-up in the slides, but I'm putting it in the chat too if you want to follow along. So what we mean by this is take into account, did they highlight specific skills that they're looking for in the description? If they did, and you have experience with those things, put that in your response. Just make sure that you're reading it carefully so you are putting your best foot forward in that application. Another, and this is a big one, is to show, don't tell whenever possible. So if you go back to that resource we were looking at earlier, the professional communication tips, and we look at this when applying, this shows a great example of someone showing in their application versus telling. Imagine that someone's applying for a social media micro internship and the company gets these two application responses. The first person says, you should select me because I have experience making attention-grabbing social media posts. That's not a bad reason to pick someone for a project, but you've got to imagine the people who are doing the selecting and how they're going to respond to that. So let's say there's colleague A talking to colleague B. Hey, colleague B, we need to pick someone for that social media project. Do you have any ideas or, preferences for who we should pick? Colleague B. What about that candidate that has experience making social media posts? Colleague A. It's a social media project. They literally all have that. Which candidate are you talking about? And seen. Now here we have someone who used something called the STAR method. So STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result. And basically it's just your reminder to tell a little story. So they have the same reason. I've experienced creating attention-grabbing social media posts, but then they gave a little situation. As the social media chair for my sorority, that's the situation. The task, I was in charge of the social media campaign for our fundraiser. The action, they planned a series of posts and videos on social media. The result, they got some really nice engagement on one of those posts, and it led to increased attendance. This is not a novel. In fact, this is only 4 sentences. But in 4 sentences, they've told a little story. Now let's imagine they also uploaded a PDF to their profile with the links to those social media channels. That conversation between colleagues is probably going to go a little bit more like this. Colleague A, hey, I need to select someone for that social media project. Do you have any thoughts about who we should pick? Colleague B, oh, what about the one that did those really cool Night in Pink videos? I thought those were just so creative. Colleague A, I know exactly who you're talking about. I like them too. Let's hire them and seen. So whenever possible, tell a little story to support your answers. Another good tip is to mirror the tone. So if they're using very traditionally formal language, try to match that energy. If it's a little bit more informal, using slang that I'm not even going to try because I don't know what half the words y'all use anymore mean, but if they're using it and it makes sense to you, again, match that energy. Make sure, again, that it is succinct. So that's even with the STAR method, keeping it short. But you want to make sure you're going beyond yes or no. So for example, if there's a question asking, do you have any experience with XYZ tool? If the answer is yes, put yes, but also explain what you've used that tool to do. If the answer is no, if you just put no, the chances of getting that micro internship are not very good. But if you have some sort of transferable skill, maybe you haven't used that tool specifically, but you've used something similar and your knowledge would transfer over, then you can say, while I haven't used XYZ tool, I have used ABC tool to do universe whatever, and they have these similar features. So give them compelling reasons to select you. I see there's a question asking, is this only for students? It's been a while since they graduated. This is open to recent graduates too. So as long as you're still trying to figure out your next phase of your career, this is something you're welcome to use. If you have full-time experience or are currently full-time employed, make sure you use that personal statement field to highlight that you're looking for a shift. Otherwise, companies may be hesitant to engage you because they think you're not available for longer term opportunities. But great question. So just wanted to highlight, the ways that those questions really matter. If you're an example person and you want to see real examples of responses, both that have been selected and those that haven't been selected, you'll also see the link to those examples in the slides that you'll get after today's webinar. Also want to give you all just a little preview of what the employers see when you apply for their projects. As mentioned before, they're going to see that information from your profile, but it's going to be combined with how you respond to those questions. Up here at the right, you can see that when they click into your application, they're going to see two options. One is to send you a message. So sometimes they might ask a follow-up question or they might request a brief Zoom interview to make sure that it's a good fit. But more often, companies are going to jump right to making the selection. Since they're using the micro-internship a lot of times as an interview for something longer term, they don't want to put you through an arduous interview for the interview. Why that is important for you to know is because that means this is really your opportunity to make an impression. The combination of your profile and your short answer responses are often it. So that is why it is so important to make sure your profile is complete, your application responses are thoughtful, and both are free from grammatical errors. I see someone asking a question in the experience section. It says the description should be 140 characters or less, but allows you to go over. Is that just a recommendation? So often with things like that, it might allow you to write more, but I would test saving it before you actually take the time to write all that. What it might do, and I haven't actually played with this, so let me see. I'm just going to do a lorem ipsum generator. If you haven't used a lorem ipsum generator, it's a nice way to just get random text. So let's get a lot of paragraphs of lorem ipsum. I'm going to grab this. I'm going to go into that section. And if you put more than the limited number of characters, it looks like it will allow you to save. So in this case, it's just a suggestion. Great question. All right, so want to talk a little bit now about navigating the Parker Dewey platform. I've already showed you how you can go back and forth from your profile, which you can edit at any time, versus the dashboard, where you're going to see the opportunities. On the dashboard section, you're going to see a few different pieces. Once you've applied to a micro-internship, you'll be able to know the status of your application, depending on which of these tabs it falls under. Oh, I see someone is looking for those examples. I can grab those for you right here. They are linked to in the slides. So when you get the slides afterwards, when you go to this short answer and examples resource, you'll see the link right here, but I also put the link to those in the chat. All right, so navigating the Parker Dewey platform, if it's inactive, that's how you know you're still being considered. If it's moved to past, that's how you know, even if they didn't respond to your individual application, that you were not selected for that opportunity. So you're not out in limbo wondering, hey, am I ever going to hear about this opportunity? I see a question. Do we have anyone at Parker Dewey that will help or edit statements or application? Love this question. And yes, we have monthly office hours that you are welcome to attend. During these office hours, we do exactly what you have described. If you want to have us review your profile or review what you're planning to submit or anything like that, our next office hours session is going to be coming up on Tuesday, September 23rd. So please feel free to add that to your calendar and join us if that's something of interest. I see someone else asking, can you update your application after you've already submitted it? If it's in this active section, then typically what you can do is there's going to be an option to retract the application. You'll be able to find it again in the Opportunities tab if it's still available, and then you can submit your application anew. Now, we don't know exactly when employers are going to be reviewing and making selections, so I would write your new responses in a doc or something like that, retract your application if it's inactive, and then immediately go apply for the new one. Because we don't want you to have your application missed if they happen to be reviewing right then. But yes, you can retract and then reapply. Great question. If you have been selected for a micro internship, you are going to receive an email notifying that you have been selected, and then you're also going to get a micro internship success checklist with next steps. The other piece here is that messaging tab. If they do decide to message you, sorry, I got too many tabs open here. One second. This is where those messages will appear. So before the kickoff, we encourage you to make sure all communication stays inside the Parker Dewey platform just for your safety and security. A reminder too that regardless of the company you're applying with, we, Parker Dewey, are the employer of record for all these projects. So that means whether you're working with a Fortune 500 company or a local mom and pop shop down the street, when you get paid for a Parker Dewey micro internship, that pay comes from Parker Dewey. What that also means is if anybody ever says, oh, we're selecting you, we just need your social or your ITIN or your address or any other personal information to pay you, you say, only Parker Dewey needs that information. Report it by letting us know. We're going to make sure that they get handled, but never give any sensitive information to anyone but Parker Dewey. That's one of the ways we protect you when you're doing micro internships. Now that we've talked a little bit about how to navigate, I want to get into some of those details about what will happen once you have been selected. You will get an email notifying you, and it's also going to contain the contact information for the professional that posted the project. So in that, you will get resources to reach out to that professional to get a kickoff meeting set up so you can ask questions and get all the context you need. If you run into problems along the way, maybe the project isn't what you expected, or something like that, there are a few resources you can reach out to. If it's just a matter of needing more context, your first resource is going to be that micro internship supervisor at the company. If there's something more than that, if you feel that the scope of the project has changed, or if you're having trouble communicating with your supervisor, or if your life circumstances have changed and you don't feel you're going to be able to complete the project on time, reach out to the Parker Dewey team. We want this to be a positive experience for both parties. So we're going to help you professionally navigate whatever the situation is. You can also ask your supervisor if there's anything you're working on that is confidential. By doing Parker Dewey micro-internships, you do agree to something called a non-disclosure agreement, commonly known as an NDA. So that just means if they share any confidential information with you, you're not allowed to share it with anybody else. Now, most of the time, micro interns aren't going to be working on anything confidential, but you still want to ask your supervisor, is anything you're sharing with me something that should not be shared with someone else? If the answer is no, it also doesn't hurt to ask your faculty or if you have any mentors, hey, I'm working on this project. This is how I'm going about it. Do you have any suggestions? So don't forget that they're a resource too. Also want to have a quick note about pay. Parker Dewey processes pay once a month. So typically it's processed at the end of the month. Assuming you filled out the forms to get paid when you got selected, you'll see it in your bank account within the first couple of days of the next month. So if you completed a micro internship today, September 18th, as long as you filled out the forms, you're going to see that money in your bank account the first couple of days of October. If you finished it on October 2nd, you're going to see that in your bank account the first couple of days in November. Depending on when you finish your micro internship, it might take a little while. So don't think that Parker Dewey has stiffed you. If you have questions about the timeline for your payment, reach out to us, not the supervisor, to us, and we'll be happy to handle that for you. I see a question, if selected, will I receive training for the role? Or are you expected to already know everything? You should have a basic understanding of the skills needed for the project. So if you're looking at opportunities and you go, ooh, a project related to SEO, I'd love to do that. If you're going, but I have absolutely no idea how, what I would recommend in that case is to either take a course or maybe look at a resource like LinkedIn Learning to familiarize yourself with SEO concepts so you can apply and be a competitive candidate the next time a project like that is posted. If you look at an opportunity like that and go, oh, SEO, I know the basics, but I don't know everything, but I know how I would get started on this project, then it's probably a good opportunity for you to apply to. As long as you have the starting blocks, there's often an opportunity that they might be able to do a little bit of coaching. So as mentioned, that micro internship success checklist that you're going to get when you're selected has a lot of resources, including a reminder for any international students, you do need to confirm your eligibility. But that's going to have a template. We know for some of you, if this is your first professional experience, maybe you're a little nervous about reaching out to that professional. Don't be, they're lovely people, but we give you a template so you can reach out with confidence to get that meeting set up. We also will get you the forms so you can get paid, some other resources for success. Some of these projects are very straightforward. After the kickoff meeting, maybe it's just going to be a few email updates back and forth. Other projects that are a little bit more complex, maybe there are going to be some check-in meetings. For both situations, we give you an example. For this instance, it's an example agenda if there's a meeting. So it guides you on how to review what you've done, reminds you to ask any questions you may have, and just really sets you up to make sure that expectations are aligned going forward. I see the question, is it possible for first-year students to do this? Yes. So sometimes companies will intentionally post micro internships that are more straightforward, specifically because they're trying to extend their talent pipeline and build an awareness of their company with students earlier in their academic career. So there might be straightforward projects involving research or writing or social media, those types of things. So just look at the projects with a critical eye. As long as you have the skills the project calls for, regardless of whether you're a first year or a senior, you can apply for the opportunity. After you complete a micro internship, you're going to get a very similar checklist, but this guides you on what to do to make the most of your experience after it's completed. We do have a post-micro internship survey. We'd love for you to share your thoughts. You're going to see the link for that survey in your Parker Dewey account. So the project will show up here in completed, and that's where you'll see the opportunity to take it. We also encourage you to review feedback that the employer may have left. You'll also see that associated with the completed project if they filled out the survey on their side. We give you resources and reminders to reflect, and there's a guide for how you can add this experience to your LinkedIn account and to your own resume. A reminder that regardless of what company you worked with, it gets added to your resume as an independent consultant of Parker Dewey. Since you are agreeing by using the platform to using that NDA, again, non-disclosure agreement. Now, sometimes you might hear about something called a non-compete agreement. I just want to clarify, those are totally different things. This is not a non-compete agreement you agree to. It's a non-disclosure agreement. So again, just saying you're not going to identify the company or anything you worked on without their permission. Usually, if you ask the company, hey, can I add you in the description on my resume? They're going to say, for sure, no problem, go for it. But you want to make sure you ask. Depending on the size or notoriety of the company you worked with, sometimes it might be more to your benefit to describe the company instead of naming them anyway. So, for example, if you're working with a local company down the street, it's great experience, but not everyone is going to know Mon Pasu's florist shop or whatever it may be. So in that case, instead of naming them, even if they give you permission, you might want to say a local florist shop. If you're working with a really recognizable big company and they give you permission, in that case, it might be to your benefit to name them in the description. But this guide really walks you through whether you're done one micro internship or multiple micro internships, how you will add it to your resume or LinkedIn. We also give you some resources for sharing your experience on LinkedIn and keeping in touch. So, really just trying to help you make the most of your experience. As we come into the last 10 minutes here, we're coming full circle. You probably recognize these folks from the beginning of the webinar when they were talking about, well, not talking about, their speech bubbles were demonstrating, they were struggling to find experience that would fit in their schedules, or struggling to find paid opportunities, or struggling to figure out what they wanted to do. You can read with the quotes on the screen, after they were able to secure micro-internship experience, how it helped them to launch their careers despite those challenges. So if you are encouraged by seeing other students be successful, you want to understand exactly how they did it and how you can do it too, we have a whole host of success stories. I just put the link in the chat. These include first-year students, seniors, recent graduates, science majors, liberal arts majors, students from big schools, students from small schools. So please feel free to check those out and be inspired. I see the question, could you still get an internship even without prior experience? This is a great question. Now, without prior professional experience, without having a job or internship first, definitely. But what I want you to consider is if you are a college student or a recent graduate, even if you haven't had an internship or job yet, just by nature of being a student, you have some level of experience. So in that experience section of your profile, highlight relevant class projects. If you want to apply for a project that involves content creation or writing a blog post, write about an assignment in that experience section where you wrote something. That's creating content. So you don't need to have a job or internship first, but do make sure you're highlighting the experience that you've gotten through your classes, even if you're a first-year student. Hopefully that's helpful. All right, folks. So as far as next steps go, if you haven't already, create that account. Here's the link to do so again. Make sure that your profile is complete. Making sure your profile is ready to apply is the best way to make sure when you find an opportunity you're interested in that you're getting that application in to be considered. Checking in regularly is key. We find that those who are getting selected are logging in on average about twice as often as those who log in but never end up getting picked. Logging in regularly just means you're going to see more opportunities as they cycle through, so it's important to check in often. If you see something that interests you, do not sit on it. Apply right away. They don't have to wait until that start date to make a selection. I've seen companies that got a candidate within a couple hours and went, this person is great. I don't need to wait for other candidates. I'm picking them, and then that project disappeared. So make sure you get your applications in as soon as you can. If you're logging in and you're not seeing a lot of projects relevant to your specific career interests, or maybe you want to do a micro internship with a specific company that you're not seeing, we do have a webinar where we talk about creating your own opportunities. This guides you on how you can reach out to companies or contacts at companies of interest and encourage them to post a micro internship. If that's of interest, we hope that you will join us. That's coming up on Thursday, September 25th. And one other tip here is we do have a Career Launchers LinkedIn page. If you're not already following it, I do recommend giving it a follow. Sometimes there are projects posted that are planning to host or select a bunch of micro interns. Sometimes we have events. Sometimes we have success stories. But there are a lot of great resources here, and I just encourage you to give it a follow if you aren't already to make sure you're up to date with the latest when it comes to Parker Dewey. So with that, folks, we are going to take some time for questions. So if you have any remaining questions, please do not hesitate to put those in the chat. Before we dig into those, just want to say thank you so much for your time today and for joining me. I hope that this is helpful, and I'm looking forward to writing some success stories about some of you in the very near future.